We're often told that time heals, that eventually the edges of grief go dull, that the loss becomes a weight you simply carry, rather than a blade that draws blood every time you move. But for a mind as fractured as Ellie's, time isn't a healer. It's a distance. When you lose someone violently and far too soon, the world is supposed to stop. The sun isn't supposed to come up. But it does. And that is a cold, indifferent kind of cruelty. The world keeps moving, even when you can't. It was the final act of the story. After experiencing a gauntlet of unimaginable violence, grief, and loss, Ellie actually gets out. The narrative cuts to a beautiful, sun-drenched farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. The lighting is golden, music is soft, and by any metric that counts in a world that's rotting quite literally, she actually made it. She has built a home with Dina and a future with the child they're raising together. A family born from the wreckage of her old world. And the thing that really gets me is that she's genuinely happy. It isn't a performance. She's not just playing house while waiting for the next tragedy to happen. She's in it. She loves them. But it's a house built on glass. A life that only works as long as the world stays perfectly still. In the quiet of the barn, a shovel tips over. A single sharp crack of wood against stone, and in that breath, the world just dies. In a heartbeat, the sunlight is gone. The warmth of the farm evaporates, and she is pulled back down into that basement in Jackson. She's not just remembering the trauma, she's inhabiting it. She's hearing the screams again. She's smelling the copper in the air. That one noise was all the proof she needed that while her body found a home, her mind never actually left the mud. To her, that happiness feels like a theft. Like she's stealing a life that belongs to the girl who died back in Jackson. Every time she smiles at JJ, she's reminded of the man who isn't there to see it. She's convinced herself that as long as she's hurting, she's still loyal. Because if she stops, if she actually lets herself breathe, then the trauma just becomes a waste. And she cannot live with that. In her head, to stop hurting is to stop loving him. You can see her state of mind in the general throughout the game. She tries to draw him, but she can never get the eyes right. It's like the trauma has physically blocked the view whenever she tries to picture him. She only sees the last moment. And even if Tommy hadn't showed up with that map, she eventually would have gone anyway. She was already losing the memory of him, and she was just waiting for a direction to run in. But why? Why walk away from a family that actually loves you just to get back into the meat grinder? In every situation like this, there is a point where the original reason you began simply disappears. When she's in the thick of Seattle, Ellie is no longer motivated by a specific memory or a desire for closure. She's being driven by the cumulative weight of her own previous actions. At this point, the hunt is not a decision she makes every morning. It is a commitment she refuses to break. She stays in the conflict because she believes that to quit now would make everything she has done up to this point meaningless. She's not trapped by circumstance. She's trapped by her own inability to admit that she is finished. And it's okay to feel that. It's okay to feel like moving is the only thing keeping the floor under your feet. When you've been in the mud this long, you stay because stopping feels like drowning. You keep going because you know the second you pull over, you have to look at the clock. You have to look at it and you have to finally admit exactly how much of your life you traded away for a race that doesn't even have a prize at the end. You're just waiting for the world to stop you because you've forgotten how to stop yourself. She keeps going because she's desperate to prove the suffering wasn't just a waste. She needs the blood on her hands to mean something, to be a currency that she can actually spend. But as she goes deeper, you can see her using the poison she used to be as fuel just to keep the fire going. The jokes stop. The sketches in the journal stop. She's refining herself into a weapon. And a person who has been refined into a weapon for so long eventually loses their utility in a peaceful environment. Then Ellie's in the farm, she is forced to confront a life that no longer requires her to be a weapon. But in the silence of that house, that function is obsolete. She has optimized her life for a singular violent function, and once that war is over, she is left with a set of skills and a mindset that no longer have a practical application. She has to face the reality of who she is, when there is nothing left to fight. A weapon is designed for a target, not a home. The hunt functions as a cognitive shield. As long as there is an objective, Ellie has a reason to keep moving, which is easier than dealing with the silence that wait for her in Jackson. She's using the mission to postpone a psychological collapse that she's not ready to handle yet. The violence is the only way she knows how to interact with grief. She has internalized the idea that if she stops, she's effectively letting Joel die a second time. This commitment to the trial is her way of maintaining a connection to him, however destructive it may be. Returning home would require her to exist without that connection, and she hadn't developed the tools to do that yet. And this is the mindset she carries into the aquarium. And it is where the whole thing falls apart. Up until then, Ellie could tell herself she was just a soldier in a war, doing what was necessary. It was the only way she could live with the weight of what she was doing. But standing over Mel's body changes everything for her. When she realizes that she's just killed a pregnant woman, the logic she built to protect herself just stops working. Look at her face. She's not winning. She's having a panic attack. Her body is physically rejecting what she's becoming. She finally sees the trade she's made. To get to Abby, she had to destroy the very thing Joel dedicated his life to protect. She spent her humanity just to stand the trial. And she finally realizes that she cannot afford the cost.
Is that okay?
And after that, Ellie's ready to walk away.
It has to be.
She has reached the end of what she can handle. But the problem is that violence has its own gravity. It doesn't just weigh you down, it pulls in everyone standing anywhere near you until they are also dragging through the same mud. Because once you've spent that much blood, the world rarely lets you walk away with a clean receipt.
Stop! She had nothing to do with this. She's pregnant. Good.
That was why the peace of the farm was never enough. That lack of resolution is what eventually pushes her to Santa Barbara. She is no longer seeking a victory or a trophy. She is simply trying to find an end to the conflict. She has convinced herself that completing what she set out to do in the first place is the only way she will ever be permitted to be still. And we go in, anticipating a final, massive reckoning. The kind of end that's supposed to make all this blood feel like it actually brought us something. We wanted a showdown between two titans. And guess what? That was exactly what Ellie wanted too. That all the time she spent suffering and shedding all that blood to mean something. She finds Abby on that beach, and for a second, she almost lets it go. Abby is done. She doesn't want the fight. She just wants to get the kid to the boat and disappear. But Ellie can't live with that. If she just lets her sail away, then every mile she traveled and every friend she lost becomes a total loss. So she forces a fight that has no fire left in it, purely because she's still trying to make the cost of the trip mean something. And what followed was not the climactic battle people wanted to see. Instead, we got two skeletons in the mud. Two people so exhausted and so drained of everything that made them human that they're barely even fighting anymore. They're just colliding. And by the time Ellie's hands are around Abby's throat, she has reached the end of the line. She has paid every cent she had, and now she can end all of it. All her grief and all of her suffering led her to this moment. Now she can finally kill her. But she doesn't. This is the question that divided everyone for years. Why didn't she finish it? After walking through a graveyard of hundreds of bodies just to get to this beach, why let the one person who actually started it all walk away? Let me tell you, it's not because she suddenly decided that revenge is wrong. After all that time pursuing this goal at a high personal cost, a simple moral lesson is not enough to change her actions. It is also not about forgiveness. Forgiveness requires an emotional capacity that Ellie no longer possesses. By the time she reaches that point, she is emotionally depleted. No. As she's drowning her, Ellie is not looking at an enemy anymore. The monster she spent all her time hunting, the one who ruined everything for her, did not survive the pillars that Rattlers put her on. In fact, that Abby died a long time ago. What's left of her in that water is just a starving, desperate woman just trying to protect a child. A story she already lived from the other side. And if she keeps her hands locked down, if she lets Abby drown, she's not fixing anything. She's not honoring Joel. She's just perfecting the role of the person who ruined her. She doesn't stop because she found a moral high ground. She lets go because she finally understands that no amount of water in Abby's lungs is ever going to wash the blood off the basement floor in Jackson. The weight she'd been carrying for so long did not protect Joel's memory. It just crushed the girl he dedicated his life to protect. She lets go because she'd rather walk away empty than stay in that mud until there's nothing left for her to save. She's not sparing Abby. She's saving herself. She realizes that she's just reenacting her nightmare all over again. But this time, she is the monster. And she's trying to salvage whatever is left of herself before it's gone for good. No happily ever after here. Ellie returns to a house that no longer feels like a home. She finds a space that no longer serves a purpose in her life. The house is filled with items belonging to a version of herself that she abandoned when she left for Santa Barbara. When she picks up the guitar, she is forced to confront the physical consequences of her decision. The loss of her fingers is the literal price of her final pursuit. In her attempt to finalize her conflict with Abby, she effectively traded her only remaining physical connection to Joel, the ability to play his music, for a confrontation that provided no resolution. She succeeded in ending the cycle of violence, but the result is an absolute silence, where her connection to Joel used to exist. She has reached the end of the trial, only to realize that the cost of her journey was the very thing she was trying to preserve. And in the silence of that empty house, the memory of the porch finally replaces the trauma of the basement. Ellie's no longer fixated on how Joel died, but on the complicated reality of why he chose for her to live. She admits that her life would have possessed a definitive meaning if she had just died in that hospital, still searching for a grand sacrifice to justify her existence. To Ellie, being the cure was a clear functional purpose, a why she feels so lost. But Joel's choice was an explicit rejection of that utility. He did not see her as a biological resource or a solution to a global crisis. He saw a person whose value was inherent, not instrumental. Joel did not save her to be a soldier or a martyr for his memory. He saved her to experience the mundane, unheroic reality of simply being alive. He would not have wanted her to spend her life paying back the debt of her survival through violence and misery. And ultimately, his gift was the permission to exist without a justification, to live for its own sake rather than as a means to an end. This is a hard truth to sit with. We are often desperate for our pain to be a down payment. We spend years trying to make our hurts count for something, as if by suffering long enough, we can eventually trade that misery in for a sense of purpose or a grand resolution. We stay in the fight because we are terrified that if we stop, we are admitting the original loss was just meaningless. We treat our own brokenness as the only proof that what we lost actually mattered. But pain is not a currency. It's not a transaction you can use to buy back the past or change what happened in that basement. Staying miserable does not make your loss more significant. It only ensures that you never have a life of your own. It is a sunk cost of the soul, where we keep investing in a version of ourselves that died a long time ago. And the most honest thing you can do, and the most difficult, is to admit that some horrors were for nothing. They weren't lessons, they weren't tests, and they did not happen to make you stronger. They were just terrible things. And once you accept that your suffering does not owe you a payday, you can finally put it down and walk away. You don't have to be fine. You don't have to reach a point where you're glad it happened because of who you became. If your pain does not have a grand purpose, you don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to use it. You can just put it down. You don't have to be a masterpiece of healing. You can just be a person who stopped fighting. You can simply be. You are permitted to exist as a person rather than a purpose. You can finally step away from the pressure to be the one who protects, the one who fixes, or the one who gives everything away, and recognize that you are allowed to value yourself for your presence alone, not as a debt you must pay through your own exhaustion. Your suffering does not need to have a meaning for it to be real. It was real because it happened. But you are real because you chose to survive it.